Hello everyone, and welcome back to another whiteboard video. Today, I'm going to explain to you my number one tip. This is something that has totally changed the game for at least me personally on lateral raise, specifically cable lateral raise motions. So I'll explain what the hell this is in just a second, but here's basically the tip. Normally you have a handle, right? And this handle is actually broken because of my superhuman strength. But normally people grab the handle like this, right? And they'll do a raise this way, or maybe it's a front raise, a side raise, whatever it happens to be, reverse fly. And that's like the normal way to grip things. That's our intuition, we grab it this way. But the tip is basically this. Imagine that there's no handle and ignore the handle, and whatever D handle you happen to have, basically just scoot it to the side, right? It can be either side. And instead of grabbing the handle, what you're gonna do is you're gonna loop your hand through, and you're gonna put the loop on top of the wrist, or really on top of the hand on the back side of the wrist, okay? And basically what the tip is do all of your raising motions with this kind of a grip. So if you're raising, doing a Y raise, it should be pulling you this way. If you're doing a front raise, pulling you this way. You're doing, let's say, like a reverse fly, pulling you this way. Any variation of some kind of like cable fly raise type of motion, loop the hand through back of the wrist and do it that way. And when you do it, make sure that it's not like over your hands. People will tend to put it over their fingers and their fingers are awkward. Put it really close to the wrist, right? So how does this work, or really why does this work? And really what's the point of it? So imagine that this is the hand, wrist, forearm complex. Okay, I did my best, just forgive me. And this is me and I'm holding, a handle like this, right, from the side. So that's the perspective. Whenever we hold something and we imagine that there is a resistance direction that is pulling the hand like this, right? So I'm doing a raise, pulling my hand like this. We have to ask ourselves, what muscles need to resist the wrist from being bent this way? Well, the muscles on this side of the joint, right? The wrist extensors, right? The muscles basically that do this, and that also take your fingers upward like this, right? So they take your fingers from here to here, and they take your wrist from here to here, right? Both of them simultaneously. And so they sit on the back side of the joint and they run sort of through on the back side of your fingers that way. But not just the wrist extensors, finger extensors need to contribute to this. Why? Well, because you also have something in your hand. Imagine you put a really heavy weight in your hand and you just, held it by your side and you tried to hold it there. What fatigues? What's the thing to essentially give out? Well, it's your fingers trying to basically hold on to the implement, right? Imagine you're just hanging from a bar, your fingers, it's hard to hold on. And what muscles do that? Well, they're the muscles that go like this and that go like this, the opposite. And so where do those muscles sit? Well, they sit on this side of the forearm. Hopefully you can see that. And they run sort of in through the hand like this, right? Because these muscles on this side, they go like this and they bend. These muscles on this side, they go like this and they extend. And so when you're gripping something like a lateral raise, doing a raise this way, you have to recruit both sides of the joint simultaneously. And that's great for the joint, that's necessary for the joint because it has to be held together and you have to be able to keep your fingers squeezed and also your wrist extending, but it makes you a lot weaker than if you just had something applied over top of your wrist. Why? Well, think about it this way. When I do this, I no longer have to grip something, right? There's no handle in my hand to actually have to hold on to. So now I can basically just use the muscles on this side of the joint to be able to resist that from happening. And not only that, I can apply this thing really, really close to the wrist, right? So you see, here's the wrist joint about. If I apply this really far away, you see how far that is? Or if I have to grip something here, you see how far that distance is? The longer the distance, the harder it is to hold in terms of resisting this bending. And so the more I can sort of stack this close to the wrist, the less work my wrist actually has to do. In essence, we're not only sort of taking the wrist resistance, the wrist force that we have to actually act against out of the equation, we're lowering the forces and thus potentially the complication through the forearm and the elbow in terms of maybe, you have a lot of other exercises where you're training these muscles and, you don't want another exercise that's just sort of taxing that same tissue, stressing those same tissues, but it also just allows you to purely wrist extend, wrist straighten against the load, rather than having to manage both this and this, right? Because when we have to manage both sides of the joint simultaneously, you can think about it like this. What's going to be stronger, a situation where one side of the joint can just pull freely, or a situation where one side of the joint kind of has to play this like seesaw teeter-totter game with the other side, right? If you recruit both sides of a joint simultaneously, that is in essence a situation that's going to prevent either side from contracting maximally. If it's like if you asked your biceps and your triceps to contract maximally in a curl, well, you would only get so far because you would sort of be fighting yourself, right? Think about it that way. So this works in essence for those two main reasons. It decreases the force on the wrist and it decreases the amount of sort of toggle that your wrist muscles need to do. And a lot of you may think that intuitively this wouldn't matter, wouldn't make a difference until you try it, okay? So the steps are basically just, you do your normal raise, you make sure that you move the handle out of the way, and you make sure that it's nice and close to your wrist, and make sure that it's always basically equal and opposite to the direction. So if I'm doing a raise like this, I don't want this to be sort of on my hand this way, then I'm changing the rotation of my shoulder. So really get used to actually feeling exactly where the pressure needs to be for this to stay nice and stable so it's not sliding all over the place. I can almost guarantee, and by the way, if you have no problem with lateral raises already, you know, what's the harm in trying something new? What's the harm in trying something additional that may make something feel even better for you, right? I don't think there's a potential harm. And again, for those of you maybe who have some wrist, forearm, elbow, buggy issues, this could be something that totally changes the game for you. A lot of people have come back and reported to me specifically, direct messaging me saying, Ben, I had never felt such a good contraction in my middle delt. I've never felt totally free of elbow discomfort during lateral raises until I did this thing. So give this a try. I hope it helps, and I'll see you all in the next video. Are you someone that wants to be able to target any muscle in your body when you're lifting, but you also don't give a shit about complicated anatomy and biomechanics? If you are, then this is the perfect ebook for you. The Target Any Muscle ebook is not really an ebook. It's more like a lifetime cheat sheet guide to lifting. You need a total of zero understanding of anatomy and biomechanics to understand this material. And that's because every chapter is full of tons of different diagrams and very visual, simple explanations about how to set up an exercise for any muscle. In addition, every chapter functions as a standalone guide, so you can simply click on the table of contents and navigate to any muscle group that you're training on any given day. Every single chapter includes visuals of how to stretch any muscle, how to shorten any muscle, how to load any muscle, and then how to stabilize your body so that you can train that muscle appropriately. And in addition, at the end of every chapter, there's a training FAQ to address commonly asked questions and a full video lecture summarizing each chapter with me and my skeleton model to demonstrate. This is meant to function as a cheat sheet for life. This should be the last product that you ever purchase about how to lift. I hope you all enjoy the guide. Happy gains.